Welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College, a program that encourages discussion in our community on today's local and global issues. Now your host for Conversations from St. Norbert College, author, professor, and nationally known sports economist, Dr. Kevin Quinn.
Welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College. Our special guest is Gary Grzesk, head men's basketball coach at St. Norbert College, and we'll discuss the tremendous success his Green Knights have had on the court and in the classroom. Gary, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Well, you're a Wauwatosa native, so you know all about Wisconsin and the football tradition in Wisconsin. But Wisconsin also has a tremendous basketball tradition that goes back a long time. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to start off with maybe your corner of the basketball tradition here in Wisconsin. So you played for UWGB,
Yep.
and you were part of the team that probably were part of the greatest win in the history of that program. So talk a little bit about that.
No, it was a tremendous win. It was 1994, my sophomore year. We ended up being the 12 seed, playing the 5 seed, California, out in Ogden, Utah. And if you remember the year before, Cal had Jason Kidd, Lamont Murray as freshmen, and they actually upset Duke, went to the Sweet 16, so they were kind of a trendy pick to make it all the way to the Final Four, even though they were a 5 seed. And we were a 12 seed, but we also had 5 fifth-year seniors on that team. Myself and Jeff Norgard were redshirt sophomores, so just a lot of experience on that team. And you got the feeling going into that game, like just getting to the NCAA tournament wasn't the pot of the gold at the end of the rainbow. These guys wanted to accomplish a little bit more. As freshmen, that group had played Michigan State in the NCAA tournament, so it was a very seasoned team going into the NCAA tournament, and we didn't look ourselves as the underdog.
Yeah, and you weren't. I mean, you won the game, and in fact, you know, the big story of the game really was Jason Kidd, who people know now primarily as the coach of the Bucks, right? Who had a great NBA career, and you were assigned to guard him.
Yeah.
And he shot something like what do I have here? 4 for 17, and you shot 40%.
Right.
So, which is, I mean, unbelievable because he was, if not one of the top players at the time. And the New York Times had a great line about that. They referred to you as the pest that climbed inside of Kidd's jersey. So how did you do that?
Yeah, well, I wasn't much of an offensive player, so for me, the best way to get on the floor and help the team was with the defense. So kind of took that as my role. Ben Johnson was in a similar role when he was in front of me 4 years, kind of passed that down to me. So that was the one way I can get on the floor, help the team. So all that year, the entire year, I was kind of assigned to guard the opposing team's best perimeter player. So I was kind of thrust into that role. I took a lot of pride in it. And certainly I got assigned to him, but you also talk about the team defense, the other 4 guys that were on the floor that if something happened and Jason Kidd went by me off the dribble, we instantly had 2 or 3 guys right around me in the help position to really stop him and contain him as much as possible. But he's a tremendous player. You could just see some individual plays that he made in the game that just kind of make you look back at it and say, wow, he's a tremendous talent.
I would love to say I watched the game, but I didn't. I was here on campus for my interview. Mm-hmm. And it was, I think, St. Patrick's Day, if I'm not mistaken, or the day before, the day after. And literally, the college could not find anybody that was willing to take me out to dinner because everybody was watching the game. I mean, it was quite an experience. I mean, it was in Utah, right?
Yeah, Ogden, Utah. And the other thing is we played 10 guys. We had a very deep bench. Cal really relied on 6, 7 guys, and especially Jason Kidd, Lamont Murray. So with the altitude in Ogden at the end of the game, there were a couple of times we were on the free throw line, and I would look across at Jason Kidd and Lamont Murray, and both those guys had their hands on their shorts, on their knees, and you could just tell they were a little bit short of breath towards the end of the game.
Well, you know, a lot about your college experience there, you know, really spoke to the fact that you were going to be in coaching. I mean, you were a 4-year letter winner, 3 NCAA tournaments, which, I mean, had to be an incredible experience. You were a captain your junior and senior year, and you finished up with 450 points and 496 assists. So, I mean, that's a serious college career. And, you know, that speaks of the kind of leadership. The other reason why that you were probably ticketed for a coaching gig is because you played for one of the legendary coaches in the history of college basketball. So
Yeah.
tell us about him.
Well, Coach Bennett was tremendous to play for. I redshirted my first year, so I actually learned a lot by watching Tony Bennett, Ben Johnson. Those guys were seniors my redshirt year. Got to practice against them, kind of take a step back and see what it was like on the sideline. So it was very hard to go through practices but not play. But at the same time, you got appreciation for what those guys were as leaders on the floor, as captains. And then after that, people thought the program might have taken a step back with the loss of Tony and Ben Johnson and those guys. And certainly my freshman year, we didn't have a very strong season, but then to play in 3 NCAA tournaments after that was a tremendous experience for me. And really, I took a lot of my coaching philosophy from Coach Bennett. Things that he was teaching you on the floor related to things off the court. So you were learning life lessons every day in practice going through that. Certainly the games were tremendous, but the experience and the relationship with Coach Bennett and the other teammates was something that I'll take with me the rest of my life. And when I knew I wasn't good enough to continue playing basketball or earn a living playing basketball, coaching was the next best option. And I attribute a lot of that to Coach Bennett, the assistant coaches, Woody Wilson, Steve Swan, Mike Heidemann, and even some of the coaches I had in high school and grade school.
Well, Dick Bennett probably is identified with the Wisconsin style of playing basketball, which I read somebody say that, use every possession like it's your last one. And it's a sin if you shoot with less than 5 seconds on the clock. That's not an entirely fair characterization, but it definitely emphasizes defense and discipline.
Sure, and I think all the jobs that Coach Bennett took were kind of rebuilding jobs. So I think if you look at the first couple of years when he was at those places, the easiest way to make up the difference was with the defense and the rebounding and being disciplined on the offensive end, taking good shots, taking care of the basketball. So you're not going to beat yourself. You might not be as talented as some of the teams you're playing against, but you're not going to beat yourself. You're going to give yourself a chance to be competitive in those games. And everything that we were doing was to try and prepare to beat the best teams. You can play a lot of different ways and different styles and beat a certain amount of teams. But when you're trying to beat the best teams in the country, you have to play a certain style and brand. And I think that's a tribute to Coach Bennett and the reputation that he deserves.
Well, one of the things I find interesting about Horizon League basketball generally, and I'm not a basketball expert, I look at it and say, oh, they're playing basketball. But there seems to be a wide variety in the styles that are played. There are some teams that really emphasize, discipline, playing basketball, and there are other teams that literally roll the ball out on the floor and try to get just the best athletes they can.
Sure.
And as a fan, it's kind of interesting watching the collision of those two styles.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to win basketball games. Even within our league, you have Grinnell, who averages 120 points a game, and then you have other teams that really kind of play in the half court. So there's a lot of different ways to win. I think the biggest thing is you get all those kids to buying into your system and believing that is the best way to give you a chance to win.
And I think that those leadership skills transcend basketball. Whatever you do in life, getting your team to buy into what it is that you're doing is the key, right?
Yeah, to get all those kids on the same page, believing, and have that culture passed down from your older kids to your younger kids. So when you have a true program, I think you're going to try to have sustained success. And so when we were at Green Bay, Tony graduated, people thought the program would fall off, but there was enough of a culture there that it was passed down from Tony and to the younger guys and to the next group of guys coming up. So, yeah, I think you want to get all of your team to buy into your philosophy, and that filters down to the younger kids.
So when you graduated, you made a decision to go into coaching. At some point you must have thought, okay, maybe I'll play in Europe. So talk about what that experience was like. Your whole life is around basketball.
Sure.
Right? And then you're not going to play anymore. How do you go about making that decision?
Yeah, well, for me, I knew my senior year I wasn't going to continue to play. I was more of a defensive guy, and even the overseas leagues, if they're going to take an American on those teams, you have to be a great scorer, really tall. So I kind of knew during my senior year I was going to be done playing. So the next best thing for me was to stay involved with the game, be around basketball, and get into coaching. So initially I went to Youngstown State for 6 years, coached under 2 different coaches out there. Dan Peters, who was with Bob Huggins, he kind of came from that Bob Huggins tree. And then John Robick came from UMass, and he was with Bruiser Flint and the John Calipari tree. So he's now at Kentucky, won a national championship there. So two great coaches to learn from in my 6 years at Youngstown. But for me, it was a great way to stay involved in the game and do something I love doing. I wanted to wake up every day, go to the office, and be excited to go to work every day. And for me, it's a labor of love.
So, okay, you're done playing. You show up on the Youngstown campus. What are you doing? I mean, what? How do you start? What do you do?
Yeah, I was just
What's your day like?
Learning it from ground one, so a lot of it was on the fly. I would hang out with the coaches at Green Bay, stop down their offices, and visit with them when I was playing. But now you're on the other side. I really had no idea what I was doing initially, so a lot of it was just asking questions with the other assistants, meeting with them, figuring out what my duties and roles were. And if you remember at the time, they used to have restricted earnings coaches. Mm-hmm. So at the big schools, you had 2 full-time assistants and then a third assistant. Well, the third assistant, your earnings were capped at about $15,000 at big schools. But you work a camp in the summer, maybe they pay you $100,000 to work their camp. So that's a good way to supplement your income at those big schools. Well, the small schools, the mid-major schools, they capped your earning the same way, but you didn't get any camp money. So I was living check to check. I had a studio apartment, basically live in the office, paying my dues. But the money wasn't a big factor to me. I was single at the time and just happy to have a job in basketball.
You know, as a sports economist, I get lots of questions over many, many years from students. Boy, I really want to get into the sports business. You know, how do I do it? And what I tell them is take any job you can. Be around it, build your resume. But if you think you're going into it because you're going to get rich the first few years, you are very sadly mistaken. Yeah. I mean, you should build up a skill set so that if you need to exit, you can exit. But if you really love it, when you're young, you're 22, 23 years old, that's the time to do it, because you don't have the house, you know, the spouse, the you know, the car payments and all that sort of thing in the same way.
Yeah, if you're going to do it for the money, then you're better off finding another profession.
Yeah. You know, it was interesting, the restricted earnings thing you were talking about, the NCAA, I think, got sued because they were practicing restraint of trade, and then they had to pay a whole bunch of people after the thing. I didn't know about the $100,000 camps, though. That was an interesting.
Well, that was a kind of a backdoor way to supplement the income for those big schools. And actually, Woody Wilson, who was an assistant at Green Bay, he was in that restricted earnings position for a number of years from his time at Evansville and then at Green Bay. So when that went to trial and the NCAA got sued, he got a big settlement.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, I was only in that position for 1 or 2 years before the lawsuit came about.
So you got an Applebee's gift card then.
Lawyer's fees.
Yeah, lawyer's fees. I mean, you spent your time in Division I, right? And then you went to Lakeland College, down the street here. That was Division III.
Sure.
So what was that transition like?
Well, it was much different. Going from Division I, you're able to offer a full scholarship, and really you're looking at elite level athletes and skill level. Division III, there's a lot more kids that can play different levels of Division III, so you have a larger pool to recruit from. But it's a little bit harder because the financial aid piece, especially at a private school. So you're trying to piece together their ability. Certainly they have to have a certain level of athleticism, skill level, the academic requirements, and then the ability to afford college through academic scholarships, grants, loans. And it's a much longer process. So usually at Division III, you start tracking kids at the end of their junior year, in their summer of their going into their senior year with their AAU teams, their high school teams, and then you watch them all throughout their senior season, throughout the winter, and then you wait for the financial aid to come out in the spring. So it's a much longer process, but at the same time, when those kids choose your school, you get to know the families and the kids so well. By the end, it's really a great fit for all the right reasons.
You know, you were there at Lakeland for 2 or 3 seasons?
3 years.
3 seasons,
yeah.
And you did very well there. And then you had an opportunity to come to St. Norbert. So, I mean, why would you make that change?
Yeah,
I mean, you're established, you got 3 years in, you're doing well. Why would you want to make that move?
Yeah, well, Green Bay and De Pere is kind of like my second home. Having spent 5 years at Green Bay during college, just knowing the De Pere community, the Green Bay community. I had friends that had gone to St. Norbert and was familiar with the campus. So it wasn't a no-brainer decision, but when the position came open, I definitely had a lot of interest. we came up here, went through the interview process, and actually sat down with Father Jim Baraniak.
Oh, sure.
And my wife was with me at the time, and we got out of that meeting, and she goes, boy, if he's going to help you recruit some players here and meet with some of the kids that you're recruiting, it would be a great fit for you all the way around. So it was a tough decision. There's some great people at Lakeland. It was my first opportunity to be a head coach, but at the same time, this is like a second home for me, and it's just been a great fit.
Well, you're coming into this year, which is your 10th season, is that correct? Mm-hmm. So you're 169-58, which I don't care what you're doing. If you're 169-58, you're doing pretty well. And I do want to talk a little bit about something else. So you are in the midst right now of an epic streak. And I know we shouldn't talk about it, but I can't not talk about it. You've won years and years of conference regular season games. Yeah. So very few people get to be Joe DiMaggio quite the same way. How do you handle that with your kids? How do you handle that with your coaching staff? And you yourself, how do you not get distracted by that?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go into winning that many games in a row. First of all, I think you have to start with the players. I think they've really handled success pretty well. I know if we would lose a game, I know that they would bounce back and react well to that. But sometimes it's harder to handle success and learn from that. So I think I'm most proud of the consistency of those groups over the years. And then you start with the players in the program. They're just very level-headed kids. I don't think they let it go to their heads. You look at the assistant coaches, we're very fortunate to have 5 volunteer assistant coaches that really have a passion for the game. They're around the kids a lot. They love teaching. And they all have different skill sets and full-time jobs outside of basketball. And then you get fortunate, you win a game that you're not supposed to win. Another team has one of their key players injured. And then you have to obviously play pretty consistently over the course of that many years to string it together like that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, in your 10th season here, you've lost relatively few games, but part of the game is losing. Mm-hmm. So since it's such a rare event, how do you handle it? What do you tell the kids after a loss? How do you handle it? I mean,
yeah,
how do you get past that?
When you initially meet with them right after the game, you try not to say too much because the emotions are running high. But you really try to learn from the losses, learn from the wins. So there are some things when you're in victory, you win, that you're not going to accept just because you didn't play well, do the things that you were capable of. And there are some times where you can accept getting beat by a superior opponent that just plays well on a given night. So that's one of the things that I took from Coach Bennett. Do not accept in victory what you wouldn't accept in defeat. So even if we're winning a game, we're still trying to learn from that, get better, review the game film, make the corrections that we need to make.
So when you compare your philosophy about coaching, I mean the totality of it, and you compare Dick Bennett's, I mean, in what ways did you draw from him, and which ways do you think you might be a little different?
Yeah, I think I've drawn the majority of my philosophy from him. I think before you talk about X's and O's, the kids in the program have to really know what your program is about. And he had really some core philosophy things that we've based our program on and basically stole from Coach Bennett. And that's the principles of servanthood, humility, passion, unity, discipline. And hopefully if you asked our kids in our program what those things meant, they would be able to tell and define all of those for them.
You spend a lot of time with these kids, and all coaches do, really. I mean, you're on the bus for hours and hours. I mean, it's, an 8-hour trip out to Grinnell or something like that. So, yeah, that's a long trip, and a lot of times, practices, sometimes early mornings, sometimes late nights. I mean, in many ways, what you do and what your coaching staff do is much more about teaching them about life than it is about basketball.
Yeah, and especially at the Division III level. I think Division I, you're kind of judged on wins and losses, and we are at the Division III level to a certain extent. But it's more about the life lessons. When I get invited to some of our kids now, they're getting married and having children. To see that progression from when they were maybe a freshman to a full-grown husband, father, that's very rewarding for me.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine. And having had a number of your players in the classroom over the years, I mean, they're top-notch kids. I mean, at a place like this, I mean, unless they tell you that they're going to be missing a class because they have to travel to Grinnell or something like that. I mean, you won't even know. You can't. I mean, they're first and foremost students.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you try to find out as much as you can during the recruiting process. But I think a lot of the credit goes to our admission staff and the college. I think St. Norbert just has a way of attracting good kids. You try to recruit character kids that have a certain level of skill, athleticism, but I know for a fact the college helps just attract good quality kids.
Division I basketball is a huge money thing, and I mean and it really matters.
Yeah.
So from having had experience in that world, what are your thoughts about the one and done kid versus trying to get them to play all 4 years?
Yeah. Well, the one thing I would say is that bigger is not always better. I think from a very early age, kids are taught, I need to go and play Division I or play Division II or play at the highest level I can. And sometimes it's just not the right fit. You look at the transfer rate now in Division I, it's about almost 50%, where half the kids that get a scholarship end up leaving the school that they start at. So I think you have to choose the school for all the right reasons, but I think kids are constantly being told to go to the highest level, where for the most part, kids get recruited to the level that they're going to be successful at. So if you're hearing from Division III schools in St. Norbert, that's probably a good level where you're going to have some success. If you're chasing the scholarship and going after it, that's fine, but a lot of times it's not going to work out and those kids end up transferring.
So when you talk to kids, that's only part of it. You have to talk to their parents as well. So what kinds of things do you talk about with parents? What do parents want to know about?
Yeah, well, I think the beauty of Division III athletics, it's still about the academics is first and foremost. Majority of the time, these kids aren't going on to play professional basketball. Once in a while, you might have a couple of kids that do. But for the most part, they're picking the school based on the academics. So is it the right fit academically? Right away, when we're talking to kids, are we too close to your home? Are we too far from your home? What are you going to major in? How are your grades, ACT, GPA? All those things kind of factor in. So after one or two conversations, you get a feel, yes, this could be a fit. And then eventually in the fall, we try to get those kids to visit. And certainly the campus visit is one of the most important pieces because kids get a vibe. You go through the campus tour, you meet with the professors, you meet with the people in admissions, you meet with the coach, guys on the team, and then the kids really get a feel, is this going to be a good fit? Can I see myself going here? Mm-hmm. And now they're coming back in the winter to see us play. Then they get a chance to see me coach on the sidelines, how our program is doing overall. So there's a lot of things that go into it. But you just have to sell what you have to offer. And kids are pretty smart. They go through the campus visit. They could see the campus and see if it would be a good fit for them.
So I want to ask you a little bit more about coaching. And I want to ask you who your role models were. Obviously, Coach Bennett, who coached Division III for a whole bunch of years before he went Division I. But when you look at folks, who would you like to be thought of like you think of them?
Well, very early on, when I was young, my dad was my grade school coach at St. Jude's in Wauwatosa. So I remember he was coaching the 7th and 8th graders when I was in 1st and 2nd grade, and I used to carry the ball bag to practice, and he would put them through all the drills, and I would be on the sideline kind of copying the drills and layup drills and things that they were doing. So very early on, he was kind of my role model and somebody I looked up to. In high school, I had a couple of great high school coaches that are in the Wisconsin Basketball Coaches Hall of Fame, Jim Rebholz and George Haas. Then at Green Bay, obviously Coach Bennett, Coach Heidemann, Steve Swan. Then at the coaches that I work for at Youngstown as well. Those were guys that you pick up different philosophies from all those coaches. Some things that you definitely want to do and copy. Some things maybe, all right, that's really not who I am as a person. It doesn't fit with my philosophy. So you pick up different things along the way. I think Coach Bennett, I take the vast majority of my philosophy from him. In the modern era, you look at what Tom Izzo is doing at Michigan State. I think those kids play the right way. They don't beat themselves. They play very disciplined, very hard, and they've had that sustained success over a period of time that you try to copy and emulate as well. They're not traditionally like a Duke or a Kentucky, but if you look at their win-loss percentage, the amount of Final Fours, they're right up there with the best best programs in the country.
Absolutely, and I mean it's right in our backyard, and he has roots in this part of the country, and that's a wonderful thing to see. We talked a little bit before about your assistant coaches, and I know a couple of them, and I can tell you that I know that they're outstanding people. But talk about your coaching staff. I mean, they're not the highly paid folks, right?
Woody Wilson coached me at Green Bay. He's 74 years old, but he's forgotten more basketball than I ever know. He runs the Hoosier School of basketball camps in the summer. He's just a basketball junkie. He goes home after practice. He's going to watch basketball when he gets home. So he's been great. He was kind of a mentor to me when I was at Green Bay. Corey Shashelchik is on campus as a special learning director. That's his full-time job, so he's spending more and more time over there. But when he has free hours, he'll come over and help out and travel with us. Justin Zwiefelhofer works at Humana. Brian Rohrig works at Schneider. And then Steve Kessley is a teacher at West De Pere. So we're very fortunate. We have a large staff, but they all have real full-time jobs outside of basketball.
Yeah, it must be the most hard-to-pronounce named staff in the history of basketball. I gotta say that's probably the case. I want to talk a little bit about the camps you do, right? Which is teaching as much as anything else. And obviously you want to teach them the skills and all that sort of thing. But what are the other main messages that you're trying to get across to these young people in the camps?
Yeah, I think you teach them hard work, teamwork, discipline, the same things that we're teaching to the college kids. And really good high school programs are probably teaching the same thing. So you're teaching them skills, fundamentals, but you're hopefully teaching them life lessons. So when you get them together in the morning before they start doing the drills and all the station work, you try to give them a message or a story that they can relate to. And then at the end, when you have their attention, you sit them down again, try to give them another story, another thing that they can pick up on, and just constantly reinforcing that with young kids. I think they're so impressionable at that age. They can learn so much by just talking to them or telling them a story that they can relate to. It's a great age to learn from, the grade school age.
And I mean, it's a thrill for the kids to just be able to see that. I went to a Milwaukee Bucks basketball camp in maybe 1971 or something like that. So they were riding high. And just to be able to meet some of the players and the coaches, I mean, I was just absolutely starstruck. They did send a letter to my parents suggesting I try another sport, but and they were not wrong.
At least you knew early on.
Oh yeah, I knew. I mean, I was just happy to go to camp. I want to ask you a little bit about your family.
Sure.
And so your wife is a former coach herself, which has got to make life a little easier most of the time, right?
Yeah. Sometimes, or harder, because you get home.
You're doing it wrong.
You might have played your best game and won by 30 points, but you get home and she's asking you why you ran the baseline out of bounds play for that one time you missed the shot. So, no, it's a blessing. She's very supportive. She had a chance to go back to Youngstown, where she's from, and be a head coach. She interviewed there, didn't get the job, and ultimately when we had kids, it was too hard for both of us to continue on that path. So she's really sacrificed quite a bit from her passion, her love, to give up coaching and get into the business world. And now she's coaching our daughter, our fourth grader, Gracie. So it's kind of a blessing. Now I can give her a hard time. She comes back from a game, I can give her a hard time.
But you have two kids, right?
Yeah. My son Garrett's in 7th grade. And being a basketball coach, it'd be great if they continue to play basketball, but it's nothing I've pushed on them. They're going to find their own path, and I think the harder you push them, the more likely they are to get turned off by it and find another avenue. So I'm just going to let them be who they are. They're going to gravitate to what they're good at, what they enjoy. And I think when they're young, they should play as many sports as they can. I think specialization now is so overrated. I think what you're learning in baseball is going to help you in football. What you're learning in football is going to help you in basketball. And ultimately, all those things are going to help you in life after athletics.
I mean, I find it kind of tragic, actually, that kids get slotted by the time they're 12 years old or less. Yeah. Well, this is the sport you're in. That's it. And so the football player can't play basketball. The volleyball player can't play basketball or whatever. And that's just not right.
Right.
Well, I want to just ask one last question. Is that being a coach is a very rigorous, intensive activity. I mean, your attention is focused either on recruiting or the games or whatever. How do you balance that? It's probably not unique to coaching, but certainly it's more public with coaching. How do you balance those obligations?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a labor of love. So you're thinking about it while you're at work, but when you're at home, you try to leave it at the office, which isn't always easy to do. I'll wake up in the middle of the night thinking about a play that we ran wrong in practice the night before. But like I said, it's a labor of love, so it's something I enjoy doing. I don't have a lot of other hobbies. I have my family, and then I have my basketball family here at St. Norbert. So it's really a passion and something I enjoy doing.
Well, I'll tell you, you have a life that I think a lot of people would be thrilled to be able to lead, and I appreciate the time during the basketball season, during an important part of the basketball season, to come in and chat with us a little bit.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you've all enjoyed our show as much as I have. Until next time, I'm Kevin Quinn. Best wishes for good conversations from St. Norbert College.